Do you want cookies?
I want more cookies.
Yes, please. You did? Okay, thank you.
Have a nice day.
Bye. Sometimes it's nice to wander through an art supply store and find something that you had once used and forgotten about, and that's where today's video begins. One of the things I love to do when it comes to exploring creativity and practicing art is trying new art supplies. Now, I'm not huge on going out and buying a whole bunch of art supplies, but there's a couple that I've wanted to play with for a while, and that's what I'm going to do today. The first one is these Faber-Castell gelatos, which are now called art crayons. I used to have these well over 10 years ago. And I really enjoyed them, but I don't think I really knew how to incorporate them into my art practice. But now that I have all these art journals on the go, I thought, you know what, I've been eyeing them for months, and I thought I'm gonna finally get them because I know how much I love the Tempera paint sticks, and these kind of remind me of that, but they're more of like watercolor, so we're gonna play with these. The second thing are these Posca markers. I see everyone using these Posca markers, and so for highlights when it comes to drawing faces, I like to, I wanted to have a black and a white. And so I got this package that has 4 in it, the 2 that I wanted, black and white, and then of course you can't go wrong with gold and silver. So I'm going to be playing with those. These are the art supplies that I'm going to be using today when I test out my Faber-Castell art crayons. I am going to be using these Kuratake watercolor paints. If you've been following my channel, you know that these aren't an art supply that I tend to use very often, and I'm just trying to get used to using them because they are pretty bright, and you know, there's quite a bit in the pan, so I'm going to continue to try to figure out how to use these properly. I am also using my Tempera paint sticks, my Neocolors, and some Stabilos as I play around to see how the Posca markers and the Faber-Castell art crayons work. There's 12 colors. I like all these color choices. There's a paintbrush, which looks really nice, and some sponges, a softer one and a harder one. But I am just going to play around with these and show you how they work. I really love this color. Kind of looks like lipstick. The first thing I'm going to do is test these out on different types of paper. I'm using a watercolor paper and then just a sketchbook paper. Even though I added it on the watercolor paper and added water to it, it takes a little bit of work or a lot of layering before it has that nice creamy texture when you add water. But I like the feel of how it goes on the paper, and so I'm just going to swatch them all and then draw with them. This is on sketchbook paper with no water added, and this is on watercolor paper with some water added. I think you could use it either way. And now I'm just going to draw. I don't want to draw something with like a pencil or marker. I'm just going to see if I could draw a face and use only the crayons with them and some Posca markers at the end for just the detail. So I just want to see how these perform when you layer them together and without water and then with water and then adding the Posca markers for detail. Once I let the gelato or Faber-Castell crayons dry, I added some of the Posca markers. It smudged a little bit, but I will say that once you let it dry, it's a nice matte finish, and you can put acrylic marker on top. Sadly, the Posca, because it's water soluble, I don't know, it just kind of, I smudged it by accident. Otherwise, I really like the way that this turned out. And I guess the secret is, well, this isn't the right paper, first of all, for wet material, but I do like the way this ended up looking. So if you are using watercolor paper, whatever paper you're using, and you add water to the gelato or crayons, let it dry to a nice matte finish, and you can add acrylic marker on top. I really like these Posca markers too. I'm going to get more colors because I love the way it sits on top, like the white in the eyes on top of her face. It went right on top of the crayon without a problem. I see why people really like those Posca markers. Now I really want to play with all my art supplies, especially the water-soluble crayons that I have, which would be the Neocolors and the Stabilo Woody crayons or Woody pencils, and my Tempera paint sticks, which aren't crayons, they're not water-soluble crayons, but they behave like crayons. So I want to see how all of those work together. And for whatever reason, I feel like doing mermaids today. So I'm drawing a mermaid. I'm going to do two and color them in, and we'll see how these, I keep wanting to call them gelatos, so I'll call them gelatos, work with the other art supplies. I also am using these Kuratake watercolor paints because instead of coloring everything, I want to just paint in the colors and then add the different types of crayons to see how it works together. I decided to draw with the Posca marker because I wanted to play with the black one because I plan on using it for drawing and details. And so I'm doing like a side profile and mapping in this mermaid who's going to be sort of like sitting on the moon but on top of the waves. So I'm just going to play around with that and see what I can come up with. I also wanted to mention, if you're looking for more art tutorials, please feel free to join my Patreon. I'm going to start posting more over there. I will leave a link in the description for that so you could quickly access my Patreon. This is the drawing that I had a lot of fun with because I really started getting into the Kuratake watercolor paint here. And so if you've been watching my videos, you know I've been struggling with those watercolors. I think just they're a really nice creamy paint. They're watercolor, but they remind me of gouache. But you know, if you have gouache, I tend to use gouache. But now, after all, you know, using it so many times, I'm starting to get the hang of this Kuratake watercolor paint. And what I do next is then, after I get the base colors in here, then I add the Faber-Castell crayons or gelatos on top, and then I go back in and add the Kuratake paint on top of it and some Posca markers. For me personally, I don't like using just one art supply. I really do enjoy playing with all my art supplies. And right now it seems to be trying to get used to this Kuratake. And that purchase of these Faber-Castell crayons or gelatos, I had them. I have no idea what happened to the ones that I had years and years and years ago, but I'm really glad I have these ones now to play with and add to my collection of art supplies. At this point, I'm also starting to get into these crayons. It took a while to get used to them, especially if you have a bunch of water-soluble crayons. You have to decide which ones you like the best. I feel like when you layer a lot of these gelatos on top of each other and then add water, it's a really nice effect. Trying to incorporate it into your mixed media is a bit of a different story because you're trying to see how it integrates with all your other supplies. But I definitely like these muted colors that I chose simply because the Tempera paint sticks that I have, which I think I use at the end of this drawing. I do use them. See, here they come. I knew I was using them. They're very similar to that texture of these Tempera paint sticks, except for the gelatos are watercolor or water soluble, and these Tempera paint sticks aren't. These Tempera paint sticks also have a really nice shimmer to them, which I think goes well with the whole mermaid theme. And now for the hair, I'm adding some Neocolor 2s just because I want that hair to have a little bit of shadow or darkness closer to her head. I had a lot of fun playing with these Faber-Castell gelatos or crayons. What I did notice is that it actually says gelatos on the crayons. I don't know if you could see that, but it actually says gelatos on it, gelato pastels. They probably just called them crayons because people don't know what gelatos means. What I did find is they're somewhat water soluble. To me, they're right up there with the Stabilo crayons for water solubility. I find that these Neocolor crayons, Neocolor 2s, are much more water soluble than any other crayon that I have. I will also say that I enjoyed using these crayons on top of the artwork like I did on this one. So after playing with it for a while, I like creating my artwork and then adding the crayon on top to create shadows or mark making. When I added it first, and then I added, and then I added the Kuratake paints on top of it, I actually found, and I'll have to test this out with other watercolors, but I actually found that these crayons kind of repelled the Kuratake. I don't know if it'll work that way with other watercolors. It didn't repel the Neocolors, it didn't repel the Stabilos, but there was some areas here that I noticed, and I was going to point it out, that it when I put the Kuratake watercolor, it repelled it. So I think the key is when you get new art supplies is to really play around with them. I will say that I really enjoyed these Posca markers. Not necessarily the white or black, but the gold. Wow, that gold really, the gold and silver. You could see the silver here and you could see the gold here. And I find it really nice and sparkly. I also sometimes forget, but these Craft Smart Tempera paint sticks have a really nice sparkle to them. And they're also, I would find them very similar to the crayons, because these don't do well when you add water on top of them either. These will perform a little bit better, but I like these to add on the top with a little bit of sparkle and create a little shadow. This was so much fun. I'd love to hear from you if you've tried these Faber-Castell gelato / crayons, and let me know what you think of them. I'm glad I have them. I really had fun with this theme. I want to thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions about the art supplies that I've used and showed in this video, or my art process, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day and happy creating.